April 12, 1945, late afternoon in Washington, D.C. The air inside the United States Capitol is thick with cigar smoke, paper dust, and the low murmur of exhausted lawmakers. Outside, rain spits against the tall windows, streaking the fading light into long gray lines. Harry S. Truman, Vice President of the United States for only 82 days, sits in the quiet anteroom off the Senate chamber. His tie is slightly crooked, glasses perched low on his nose as he pores over a stack of routine bills. To anyone passing by, he looks like what he has always been at heart, a working politician. Dutiful, steady. One more man trying to keep the machinery of government running during a world war. There is nothing in his posture that suggests the world is about to tilt. A page pushes the door open. Breathless. Rain speckled from a hurried run across the Capitol grounds. "Mr. Vice President," the boy says, voice a touch too urgent for ordinary business. Truman glances up, half expecting it to be some procedural nuisance from the floor. "Yes, Senator." The page corrects himself out of habit, then remembers. "Mr. Vice President, you are wanted on the telephone. Immediately." It is the White House. For a moment, Truman just blinks behind his thick lenses. The White House rarely calls him directly. Franklin Roosevelt is a distant sun in Truman's political universe, bright and overwhelming, but very far away. Meetings are formal, information is limited, and secrets are carefully kept. Still, he rises at once, chair scraping back. You can almost hear his shoes echo briskly down the marble corridor as he follows the boy. The sound swallowed by the vaulted ceilings and the muffled hum of wartime Washington. Somewhere down the hall, a radio mutters news from the front in Europe. Talk of bridges crossed and towns liberated, of a war that everyone hopes is nearing its climax. In a small room off the cloakroom, a black telephone waits on a wooden desk, its receiver already off the hook in the hands of an operator. She looks up, pale, eyes wide. "Mr. Vice President is here," she says into the line, then offers him the receiver with both hands, as if it weighs more than it should. Truman takes it. "Truman speaking." On the other end, the voice of Steve Early. Roosevelt's press secretary is tight and formal. The words are careful, almost clipped. "Harry, you need to come to the White House as quickly as you can." Truman's brows draw together. Is it the president? Is he all right? The pause on the line hangs in the air just a second too long. "We will tell you when you get here." Early replies, "Please come now." The click of the receiver going dead sounds sharper than it should. Truman stands still for half a heartbeat, the phone still pressed to his ear, mind racing through possibilities. The president has been ill. Everyone knows that. But Roosevelt has been ill before. The country has grown used to his frailty, framed in strength, the jaunty tilt of his cigarette holder, the booming voice on the radio. The idea that this might be something else does not yet fully register. Truman turns. Already moving. Coat, hat. A quick word to a staffer. They want me at the White House. No explanation. No time for one. The corridors blur past, crowded with aides and officers. Men clutching folders, stamped secret. Women in uniform, moving with stiff, purposeful strides. Outside, the rain has thickened into a steady drizzle. A black sedan idles at the curb, engine rumbling. Secret Service men waiting. Collars turned up against the weather. The car door swings open. As you slide into the seat beside him in your imagination, you can almost feel the damp chill of the leather, smell the mix of wet wool, gasoline, and cigarette smoke. The city slides by in streaks of gray and black, monuments looming and receding through the rain-streaked glass. No one talks much. Truman stares straight ahead, jaw set, hands folded tight over his hat. The wipers metronome back and forth, beating out the seconds toward something he cannot yet name. In his mind, numbers and facts crowd together, troop strengths in Europe, Casualty reports from the Pacific. Rumors of some new, terrible weapon being developed in secret laboratories he has barely heard of. Being vice president has meant briefings, speeches, ceremonies, but never the full weight of the war. That weight still belongs to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The car turns through the White House gates. Guards snap to attention, their silhouettes stark under the dim lights. The mansion's white facade looms ahead, softer in the rain, but still imposing, a symbol of continuity in a world at war. The moment the car stops, the doors yanked open. A staffer leans in, face drawn. "This way, Mr. Vice President." They hurry inside, footsteps dull against the thick carpets. Corridors Truman has walked many times before suddenly feel narrower, the air heavier. There are too many people standing too still, eyes averted, voices low. Grief has its own silence, and he feels it before he understands it. At the end of a short hall, in a softly lit room, Eleanor Roosevelt is waiting. She is in black, though that is not unusual for her. Her face is lined with fatigue and something deeper, a sorrow that has not yet fully settled, as if it is still finding all the places in her to fill. She steps toward him, small and composed, the first lady of a nation at war who has spent years visiting hospitals, factories, refugee camps, carrying other people's grief as part of her daily work. Tonight, there is a new weight on her shoulders. Harry Truman takes off his hat as he enters, clutching it in both hands. For all his years in politics, he suddenly feels awkward, like a farmer's son again, unsure of the right words in a house that has seen everything. Eleanor looks him straight in the eye. Her voice, when she speaks, is quiet, almost gentle, but there is no softness in the truth it carries. "Harry," she says, "the president is dead." The words land with terrifying simplicity. No preamble, no explanation, just a final fact that redraws the world in an instant. In that moment, the war, the Capitol, the routine business of the Senate all fall away. There is only the stillness in the room and the roaring in his ears. Truman swallows. His first instinct is not grand or historical. It is human. "Is there anything I can do for you, Mrs. Roosevelt?" he asks, voice low, sincere. For the briefest moment, her expression softens. Then she replies with the sentence that will echo in his memory for the rest of his life. "Is there anything we can do for you?" You're the one in trouble now. The words hang between them, as heavy as the rain outside, as heavy as the war that still rages across two oceans. In that instant, Harry S. Truman feels the weight of the presidency settle, invisible and immense, onto his narrow shoulders. For a heartbeat after Eleanor Roosevelt speaks. The room is utterly still. You can almost hear the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the hallway outside, measuring out the seconds as if nothing has changed, when in fact everything has. Harry Truman opens his mouth and then closes it again. He has known grief before, on muddy farm fields in Missouri, in the trenches of the last war, in the hard years of the Depression, but this is different. This is not just the death of a man. This is the end of an era that has shaped the world. He sees it in Eleanor's eyes. "What happened?" he asks quietly. Her voice does not tremble. She has had a few minutes longer than he has to put words around the shock. "He was at Warm Springs," she says. "They tell me he collapsed while sitting for a portrait. A cerebral hemorrhage. It was very quick." Warm Springs. Truman pictures the small Georgia retreat where Roosevelt went to escape the weight of this city, to soak his paralyzed legs in the warm water, to gather strength. The image of the president in his wheelchair, joking with photographers, rises unbidden, just as it did the first time Truman saw him up close. It does not fit with the finality of the word dead. Voices murmur in the corridor. The door opens and closes. More people coming, others being turned away. Someone clears his throat gently behind Truman. It is Steve Early, his usually brisk manner subdued. "Mr. Vice President," Early says, and the title already sounds insufficient. The cabinet is gathering. The Chief Justice is on his way. They will want to speak with you. The words slide into place inside Truman's mind with terrible clarity. The cabinet, the Chief Justice, they are not organizing a memorial. They are preparing a transfer of power. He looks back at Eleanor. She seems suddenly smaller in the large room, swallowed by the black dress, framed by heavy White House drapes. Yet her gaze is steady. This is not the first time she has seen history tilt. "If there is anything you need, Mrs. Roosevelt," he says again, because the habit of courtesy is strong in him. She answers once more, gently but firmly. "Harry, it is you who will need help now." They walk together toward the door. For a moment, they are just two people bound by the fact that a life has ended and another must be reordered around that loss. Then staffers, Secret Service agents, military aides, all begin to circulate around them, like small planets drawn into a new orbit. The corridors of the White House, usually controlled and ceremonial, feel different tonight. There is movement, but it lacks the usual polish. A young naval aide nearly collides with Truman, then stops, pale, to salute. A stenographer wipes her eyes and pretends she is not crying. You hear snatches of sentences as they pass. They say it was instant. Has the War Department been informed? What about Churchill? Stalin? Truman is led into the cabinet room. The table is already half-ringed with faces he knows and yet has never quite belonged among Henry Stimson from War, Edward Stettinius from State, Henry Wallace, Harold Ickes. Men who have been at Roosevelt's side through battles foreign and domestic. Their expressions are heavy, some red-rimmed, some simply blank with exhaustion and shock. Conversations die as he enters. For a moment, everyone seems to forget whether to stand or sit. Then, almost as one, they rise. "Mr. Vice President," Stimson says quietly, coming toward him with a stiffness not entirely due to age. "Mr. President," the second title, hangs in the air. Tentative, premature by law, but true in spirit. Truman shakes Stimson's hand anyway. It is dry and firm. The grip of a man who has already lived through one world war and is watching another. There is a flurry of practical words. The Attorney General speaks about the constitutional process that will follow. Someone reminds Truman that the oath must be administered quickly to ensure there is no gap in authority. Messages must go out to London, Moscow, to generals in Europe, to admirals in the Pacific. The machine of state is already turning, even as grief tries to gum its gears. "Has Mrs. Truman been told?" someone asks. Truman blinks. "Bess, Margaret." The thought slices through the fog. He nods slowly. "I will call her." They bring him a telephone. His hand shakes slightly as he lifts the receiver. On the other end, Bess's voice is familiar, grounding, full of the ordinary day that has just been shattered. He tells her as simply as Eleanor told him. There is a pause, the sound of breath catching. Then her question, "What can I do?" "Come down," he says. "They are going to swear me in." The words sound strange in his own ears, like lines from someone else's script that he has only just been handed. By early evening, the cabinet room is more crowded. Photographers set up lights, their equipment incongruous in a space that feels more like a chapel than a conference room. The harsh bulbs wash everything in a flat, unforgiving glare. Papers are moved aside, chairs scraped back. There is a murmur at the door as Chief Justice Harlan F. Stone arrives, his black robe flapping slightly around his ankles as he walks. He approaches Truman slowly, eyes intent behind his glasses. the weight of the Constitution practically visible in his bearing. "Are you ready, Mr. Vice President Stone asks. Truman hears the question differently. Are you ready to take on a war in two oceans? Are you ready to carry secrets you barely know exist? Are you ready to make decisions that will decide the fate of millions? He swallows. I will do the best I can, sir, he answers. They position him at the head of the table. Bess and their daughter Margaret have arrived. Faces pale, their travel from their apartment a hurried blur. Eleanor is there as well, steady, composed, her presence a bridge between what has ended and what is beginning. The cabinet stands in a semicircle. Some bow their heads. Others stare straight ahead. A small Bible is produced. Truman places his left hand upon it, raising his right. The photographers adjust their focus. The room seems to contract around the moment. Breaths held, bodies rigid. Chief Justice Stone begins to recite the oath of office, one short phrase at a time. Truman repeats each one, voice clear despite the pounding of his heart. I, Harry S. Truman, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. When it is done, there is no cheer, no grand applause. The photographers' bulbs pop and fade. A few hands clap politely, hesitantly. Mostly there is a heavy silence, an acknowledgement that the office which changed hands tonight did so under the shadow of death and war. Harry S. Truman lowers his hand. His title has changed. His responsibilities have changed. The world outside this room has not yet heard, but already, in his chest, the weight has settled. For a moment, after the last word of the oath leaves his lips, Harry Truman simply stands there, hands still hovering awkwardly in the air, as if he is not sure what to do with it now that the ceremony is over. Then the spell breaks. People move. Chairs scrape. Voices rise in a low, uneven murmur, like a room full of people learning how to speak again. Bess steps forward first. She has known Harry since they were children in Independence, Missouri. She has seen him in uniform, in failure, in quiet triumph. She searches his face now, reading everything he cannot yet say out loud. You all right? She asks softly. He gives her the smallest of smiles. We are in it now, he replies. Behind them, Eleanor Roosevelt is already thinking ahead. Telegrams must be drafted. Messages to Allied leaders must be worded with care. She has lived inside the rhythms of this war presidency for so long that even grief must share space with duty. Still, she finds a moment to approach Bess, to take her hand. Two women who never expected to share this particular bond stand together in the harsh electric light. If you ever need anything, Mrs. Truman, Eleanor says. You must ask. Bess nods, grateful. But she can see what Harry sees too, the invisible line between the Roosevelt years and whatever his years will be. A Navy aide appears at Truman's elbow. Mr. President, he says, the title still sounding strange, like a suit not yet tailored. The Secretaries of War and Navy would like a few minutes, if you are able. If you are able? The phrase almost makes Truman smile. Ability no longer matters. The job is his. He turns back to Bess and Margaret. I will be a while, he says. They have some things to tell me. Things. The word is small. The realities are not. He follows the aide down the corridor to the map room. Truman has been in the White House before as vice president, but there were doors that never opened for him, briefings that never quite reached his desk. Roosevelt had a habit of keeping information close, compartmentalized. Harry Truman, until this afternoon, was not in the inner circle. Now there is no circle he is outside of. The map room is windowless, filled with large charts pinned to the walls. Colored pins with tiny flags stab into Europe, Asia, the Pacific. Lines of tape mark advances, retreats, front lines shifting week by week. Telegraph machines sit on side tables, silent for the moment, waiting to spit out the latest reports from overseas. General George C. Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff, stands near a map of Europe, arms folded behind his back. His posture is straight, his face grave but controlled, the very image of disciplined command. Beside him, Admiral Ernest King represents the Navy, jaw clenched, eyes sharp. "Mr. President," Marshall says, turning as Truman enters. There is no hesitation in the title. Supremes obey the Constitution. Generals do too. "General," Truman answers, nodding to each. "I imagine there is a great deal I need to hear." "Yes, sir," Marshall replies. "We will be as concise as possible. Time is not on anyone's side in this war." They begin with Europe. Red arrows push eastward across Germany. Allied armies have crossed the Rhine. Berlin is not far now. The Soviet forces are driving in from the east, their own lines crowding closer to the capital. Town names flicker past Remagen, Leipzig, Nuremberg. To anyone else, the tide of war would look decided. To the men in this room, the number of days left is less important than the number of lives that will be spent in those days. Casualties are still heavy. Marshall says, German resistance stiffens in some sectors as we push toward the heartland. We expect a final, desperate defense. Truman listens, nodding, asking a question here and there. He does not pretend to be a military genius. He has commanded men in the last war, but never at this scale. What he does possess is a stubborn, country practicality. He wants to know how many troops, how many supplies, how many ships. Then they move to the Pacific. The map changes. Now the pins are scattered across islands with names that sound distant and foreign: Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Saipan. The Japanese empire is shrinking, island by island, but each step closer to the home islands has been paid for in blood. Okinawa is underway. Admiral King says, "We expect fierce resistance. If we must invade the Japanese mainland, we are looking at casualties on a scale comparable to, or greater than, anything we have seen." He does not put a number to it, not yet. The numbers are too large to say casually. Truman feels a knot tightening in his stomach. The war in Europe may end soon, but the war in the Pacific is a different beast. An invasion of Japan itself looms in every sentence, just out of reach, but very real. Is there any realistic expectation that they will surrender without such an invasion, Truman asks. King hesitates, glancing at Marshall, then back at the president. "Not at present, sir. Their military culture is resistant to the idea of capitulation. Even with continued bombing, they may fight to the last." The room is quiet for a moment. The maps, the pins, the lines on paper suddenly feel like an accusation. Every arrow forward is an arrow through someone's son. Then Marshall clears his throat. This is the moment he has been turning over in his mind from the instant he heard Roosevelt was gone. "Mr. President," he says, "there is one more matter you must be brought into, immediately." It was being handled directly by President Roosevelt with the War Department. "You may not have been fully briefed." Truman looks up sharply. "What matter is that?" "General." Marshall chooses his words with care, measuring each one. "A special weapons project located principally in New Mexico, under the Army Corps of Engineers. Its code name is the Manhattan Engineer District. You may have heard a passing reference to it." Truman frowns, thinking back. A vague mention in the Senate, a line in a thick appropriation bill that never quite made sense. "I've heard of large sums of money going to something in the desert." "Yes," he admits. "But I was told nothing in detail." "That changes tonight," Marshall says simply. He outlines it in broad strokes at first. "A new weapon, born from theoretical physics and grim necessity. Laboratories in Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, Hanford. Men with names Truman barely recognizes, developing a device whose destructive power cannot yet be fully grasped. Truman listens, the room seeming to grow smaller with each sentence. A bomb of unprecedented force, a single weapon that might do the work of thousands of bombers, a tool that might end the war faster or begin an age of fear no one is prepared for. So you are telling me, Truman says slowly, that somewhere in the desert of New Mexico, we are building a bomb that could flatten a city. Yes, sir, Marshall replies. If it works. The first full test has not yet taken place, but the project is close to maturation. President Roosevelt intended to make final decisions once its capabilities were proven. That responsibility now lies with you. There it is again, laid plainly at his feet. Responsibility. He removes his glasses and rubs his eyes, feeling the grit of fatigue. When he looks up, he's no longer the uncertain man who walked into the room. He cannot be. All right, Truman says. I will need a full written briefing. Names, locations, timelines. I want honest assessments, not what you think I want to hear. The same goes for our plans in Europe and the Pacific. I'm not Roosevelt. I cannot pretend to be. But I am the president now. I need the truth. Marshall nods once. Approving. You will have it, sir. Outside. The rain has stopped. Night has settled over Washington, the city lights glimmering on wet pavement. Inside the White House, a man who started this day as vice president now carries knowledge that would terrify any ordinary citizen. Harry Truman straightens, puts his glasses back on, and studies the maps again. Every pin is a decision waiting to be made. Every line is a path forward or a dead end. Somewhere far away, men are fighting in his name, under his command, though they do not yet know it. He feels very small in this room full of charts and generals, but he also feels something else rising under the fear and sadness. A stubborn resolve, forged in Missouri soil and artillery barrages in France, in bankrupt ventures and hard-won elections. Very well, gentlemen. He says, let us get to work. The maps blur together after a while. Arrows, pins, shaded regions on paper. Europe, the Pacific, supply lines, projected offensives. For more than an hour, maybe two, Truman listens, asks questions, listens again. The generals speak in the measured tone of men used to grim arithmetic. At last, Marshall closes a folder with a soft thump. That is the situation as we understand it tonight. Mr. President, tonight. The word reminds Truman that morning ever existed, that once there were ordinary days. He nods slowly. Thank you, General. Thank you, Admiral. I will need time to digest all this, but the work cannot stop. Keep the operations moving as planned unless you receive direct orders from me to change them. The country must know there is continuity. There is a quiet murmur of assent. Continuity. The nation needs it. The troops need it. He needs it. When he steps out of the map room, the corridor feels longer, the ceiling lower. A Secret Service agent falls into step beside him. As if this has always been his routine, it has not. Only a few hours ago, he could walk without a constant shadow. Mr. President, sir, the agent says. The press is gathering. They have been told about President Roosevelt. They will want to see you. The words strike him like a physical touch. The press, the people, the outside world. Until now. The news of Roosevelt's death and Truman's sudden rise has been contained within these walls, the shock bouncing from room to room. Somewhere out there, telephones are already ringing, radios interrupting regular programming, voices cracking as announcers read the bulletins. He straightens his tie. Where are they? In the press room, sir. but your staff suggests you make a brief appearance only. For now. A longer address to the nation can be arranged tomorrow. Tomorrow? He files that away. He will have to speak into a microphone. His voice carried across a country in mourning, out over oceans to men in foxholes. The thought sits heavy in his chest. In the cramped press room, cigarette smoke hangs thick in the air. Reporters crowd shoulder to shoulder, faces pale, notebooks open, flashbulbs pop as he enters. For a second, they see not Harry Truman, the senator, the machine politician from Missouri, but the new president, the man who has replaced the only leader most of them have known for more than a decade. He does not give them soaring rhetoric. He does not pretend to have prepared for this. If there is anything that I can do, if there is any help that I can give, he says simply, I will do it. That is all I can offer. It is brief, almost awkward, but sincere. They scribble it down anyway. Later. Some will say it was the honesty that struck them, the lack of polish that, strangely, made him seem more solid. When it is over, when the questions start to come faster than he can reasonably answer, an aide gently steers him away. There will be time for more. Not tonight. The hours blur after that. Messages to Churchill, to Stalin, drafted and redrafted. Consultations with Secretary of State Stettinius, with congressional leaders summoned to the White House in hastily pressed suits. Each meeting follows a pattern. Stunned faces, formal condolences, and then the inevitable pivot to business. The war does not pause for grief. Some time past midnight, the mansion grows quieter. Staffers go home or find couches in back offices. The halls, which in daylight feel ceremonial, take on a hushed, almost haunted air. Portraits of earlier presidents watch from the walls, their painted eyes following the new occupant as he moves through their house. It is only then that Truman has a moment to himself. A steward appears, discreetly. Mr. President, would you like to see your room? Your room. The phrase catches him off guard. He has never really thought of the White House as a home. Not his. To him, it has always belonged to Franklin and Eleanor, to the New Deal and fireside chats, to wheelchairs and little dogs named Fala trotting in the garden. But now the steward is holding a key. They lead him up the stairs, through a corridor on the second floor. The private quarters are quieter, softer, the carpets thicker, the lamps turned down low. Behind one closed door lies the room where Roosevelt's personal belongings still sit. Undisturbed clothes hanging in the wardrobe, books on the bedside table, glasses folded neatly near a lamp that will never be turned on for him again. Truman passes the door without opening it. That threshold belongs to another day. His own room, hastily prepared, is modest by White House standards. A bed, a wardrobe, a small writing desk, a lamp casting a warm circle of light. His suitcase, brought over from the apartment he shared with Bess, sits on a chair, still closed. There has been no time to unpack. The steward hesitates. Is there anything else you require, sir? Truman looks around. What does a man require on the night he becomes president by death and default? The question feels too large. No, thank you, he says at last. That will be all. When the door closes, the silence settles like dust. For the first time all day, there is no one to address him as Mr. President, no briefing book in his hands, no map demanding decisions. He walks to the desk and sits. The leather creaks under his weight. A pad of paper and a fountain pen wait before him. He stares at the blank sheet for a long time before finally writing. Not orders. Not policy. Dear Bess. He writes a few lines, stops, crosses them out. How does a man explain a day like this? Even to the one person who knows him best, she has been here. Of course, seen the oath, felt the strangeness of it all. but putting it into words feels like trying to collapse a storm into a teacup. At last, he sets the pen down and removes his glasses, rubbing his eyes with thumb and forefinger. The room is a blur without them. He thinks of his mother back in Missouri, a woman who still speaks of Robert E. Lee as if he had just ridden past the farmhouse. What will she think when she hears her boy is president? He kneels briefly beside the bed. It is not a grand gesture, not something meant for witnesses or cameras. It is something he has done in one form or another since he was a child in Independence. A quiet prayer, the words simple and unadorned, guidance, strength, the ability to do right. When he lies down at last, sleep does not come easily. His mind plays back Eleanor's words, the moment when the world tilted on its axis. Is there anything we can do for you? You are the one in trouble now. The phrase echoes in the darkness, not as a warning anymore, but as a description of the job itself. The country is in trouble. The world is in trouble. And so, by definition, the man at the top is too, somewhere downstairs. The phone lines crackle with late messages from London, from Honolulu, from distant commands. Somewhere across the ocean, soldiers on night duty stare out over dark water, unaware that the man in the house on Pennsylvania Avenue has changed. In the small hours of the morning, Harry Truman finally drifts into a restless sleep, still wearing his undershirt, the sheets twisted around his legs, the thought fixed in his mind like a brand. Tomorrow, the whole nation will look to him. Morning comes to Washington with a thin, colorless light. The sky over the Capitol is a flat gray, as if the weather itself understands that this is not a day for splendor. On the second floor of the White House, Harry Truman wakes with a start, unsure for a split second where he is. The ceiling is unfamiliar. The faint hum of activity below is not the sound of a boarding house or an apartment building. Then the memories of the previous night rush back, heavy and unavoidable. The president is dead. You are the one in trouble now. He swings his legs out of bed and sits at the edge for a moment, elbows on his knees, head bowed. There is no time to think too long. A knock at the door brings him fully back to the surface. Come in, he calls. An aide steps in, already holding a stack of papers. Good morning, Mr. President. The greeting is steady, but there is still that tiny hesitation before the title, like everyone in the building is practicing a new word. Morning, Truman replies, reaching for his glasses. What do we have? Schedule first. Sir, at 10, a joint session of Congress. They want to see you, hear from you, this afternoon. Meetings with the cabinet, the joint chiefs, and the budget director. And the staff has begun drafting a statement to the nation for a radio address. It could be tonight. Truman nods, already feeling the day pressing in. All right, let's start with Congress. He dresses quickly, fingers fumbling just a little with his tie. In the mirror, the man who looks back at him is the same height, the same narrow shoulders, the same slightly ill-fitting suit that marked him as a small-town politician in a city of big personalities. But where his eyes once held only the worry of a senator trying to get by, there is now something else, the faint, stunned awareness that millions of lives hinge on his choices. Downstairs, breakfast waits barely touched. He sips coffee, skims headlines. Newspapers rushed to print in the night now lie folded and crumpled, bearing his name beneath words like sudden and death and war. Roosevelt's portrait dominates the front pages, the familiar, confident smile frozen in newsprint. Somewhere beneath, in smaller type, is Truman's. A car takes him to the Capitol. As the motorcade moves down Pennsylvania Avenue, people are already lining the sidewalks. Some still in work clothes, others clearly pulled from their day by the news. Hats come off as the cars pass. Faces are somber, shells of disbelief around red-rimmed eyes. To many of them, Roosevelt was the voice who saw them through breadlines and blackouts. The man who talked to them from the radio like a distant but familiar uncle inside the Capitol. The air feels much as it did yesterday afternoon, but the atmosphere has changed entirely. The men and women he passed as a fellow legislator now wait for him as their president. He walks the same corridors, but the conversations hush as he approaches. The looks are different. Pity has turned into expectation. The House chamber is packed. Members stand in the aisles. Couriers pressed against the back wall. The press gallery full to overflowing. As Truman steps onto the floor, a murmur washes through the room, then rises into applause, not jubilant, but sustained. The kind of collective promise, we are with you, at least for now. He makes his way to the front, each step echoing in his own ears. The speaker introduces him with fewer flourishes than usual. The tone of the day does not allow for grandstanding. When Truman takes the rostrum, he rests his hands on either side, feeling the worn wood under his palms. He has spoken here many times, but never like this. Members of Congress. He begins, voice steady but not loud. I have come before you this morning in circumstances which are beyond any words of mine to fully describe. He pauses, not for effect, but because he is searching for the simplest truth. The greatest leader of our time has gone. Franklin Roosevelt has died in the midst of a war that threatens the future of the world. Like you, I am deeply shocked and grieved. Like you, I feel the weight of his absence. The chamber is so quiet you can hear the scratch of pencils. Some members bow their heads. A few brush their eyes with handkerchiefs. I ask only this of you. Truman continues, help me, as he would have asked you to help him. The tasks before us do not change because the man at this desk has changed. We must see this war through to victory. We must secure the peace that follows. We must do it together. He does not lay out detailed policy. That will come later, in committee rooms and cabinet meetings. Today is about one thing showing that the bridge from one presidency to another has held, that the center has not cracked when he finishes. The applause is longer, a wave rising and falling. It is not for him alone. It is for the idea that the nation still has a leader, that the machinery of the Constitution has worked even under the stress of war. Back at the White House, the work continues. One by one, visitors file into the Oval Office. Some familiar, some almost strangers. Cabinet members renew their pledges. Senior staffers brief him on domestic matters that had been overshadowed by war price controls. Rationing, labor disputes. The economic front is as intricate as any battle map. In a quiet moment between meetings, the door to the Oval Office opens and Eleanor Roosevelt steps in. She moves with the same calm dignity as the night before, but her face shows the toll of a sleepless, grief-marked evening. Mrs. Roosevelt, Truman says. Rising quickly, I did not expect, I will not stay long. She replies, I came to say that I will be leaving the White House as soon as arrangements can be made. This has been my home for 12 years. It is yours now. He feels a sudden, sharp pang of awkwardness. You know that you are always welcome here, he says. She smiles faintly. A tired, knowing smile. Homes change when the people in them do. Mr. President, that is the way of things. You will make this place your own. You must. They speak briefly of practical matters, staff, social routines, the small, invisible gears that keep the presidential household running. Then, as she rises to go, she looks at him with that same steady, assessing gaze she turned on him last night. Harry, she says quietly, you did not seek this in this way, but you have it. Remember that Franklin did not do everything alone. He had people he trusted. You will need that, too. He nods, hearing more than the words. You are allowed to lean on others. You're allowed to be afraid and still act. I will remember, he answers. When she leaves the Oval Office, the door closing softly behind her, Truman feels another line being drawn in time. The Roosevelt era is receding, like a ship moving slowly into the mist. His own, ill-defined and uncertain, is beginning. That evening, as the sun dips behind the Potomac and the city's lights blink on, Harry Truman sits at a desk facing a microphone. Technicians adjust levels. A red light glows, and somewhere in living rooms and kitchens across America, people lean closer to their radios, waiting to hear from the man whose name was barely known to many of them a day ago. He clears his throat, thinking briefly of the first moment in that dim White House room, of Eleanor's voice, of his own question. Helpless and human, is there anything I can do for you? Now he speaks to millions instead of one. My fellow Americans. My fellow Americans. Harry Truman hears his own voice in the headphones, slightly delayed, thinner and more fragile than it sounded in rehearsal. The microphone in front of him is a familiar shape to the nation, the same kind of black metal cylinder that Franklin Roosevelt leaned toward in fireside chats. For millions of people, that microphone is a symbol of reassurance. Tonight, it is guarded by a quieter man with rimmed glasses and a Midwest cadence. In the small studio corner of the White House, the engineers raise their hands, giving the signal that they are live. A red light glows steadily. This is not practice anymore. Somewhere far from here, kitchen radios crackle to life. I want to talk to you briefly about the tragic news which has come to us of the death of President Roosevelt. He keeps his tone simple, almost conversational. The speech on the paper in front of him is not ornate. He does not try to imitate Roosevelt. He knows he would fail if he tried. Instead, he leans on the only thing he truly has to offer the country tonight: honesty. He has led us for more than 12 years through the worst depression in our history, and through most of this terrible war. He gave all he had. As he speaks, the scene shifts in the mind's eye to the places where his words are landing. You can see a young woman in a factory in Detroit, still in her work clothes, grease on her hands, standing beside a radio in the corner of the break room. The machines have gone quiet for the evening. Her shoulders sag as Truman mentions Roosevelt's service. She grew up listening to that famous voice. This new one is unfamiliar, but it is steady. That counts for something. On a farm in Iowa, an old man sits at a wooden table, the radio cord draped down to an outlet they had installed only a few years before. His wife pours coffee into thick mugs. They do not talk. They listen. The name Truman is not entirely strange to them. They have seen it in small print under Senate election results. Now it is attached to sentences about war and sorrow and duty. On a troop ship in the Pacific, men cluster around a set fixed to the bulkhead. The reception is poor, bursts of static flattening the words. But they catch enough: death of the president, new commander-in-chief, resolve to victory. A few of the soldiers glance at one another. One shrugs. Orders still come from their captain, their general. The man in Washington is farther away than the rain drumming on the deck, but they feel the tremor all the same. Back in the White House, Truman continues, I ask you to remain steadfast. The war must and will go on. We will prosecute it with all the strength and energy that we possess. The responsibility has fallen upon me. I shall need your prayers and your help. There it is, laid out for all to hear. Responsibility. Need. Not the language of a distant, untouchable leader, but of a man who knows he is walking into the middle of a storm already raging. In living rooms from Brooklyn to Boise, people nod unconsciously when he says the word prayers. Many of them have whispered their own since the first bulletins about Roosevelt earlier in the day. Now they add one more name to their lists at night. The speech is not long. It is not meant to be. Its purpose is to draw a line. A life has ended. The war continues, The chain of command holds. When he finishes, Truman lifts his eyes from the page and looks through the glass at the engineers. A hand slices cleanly through the air. The red light goes dark. The radio address is over. He exhales slowly, the tension leaving his shoulders in a visible sag. For a few seconds he says nothing. Then he reaches up and takes off the headphones, the faint echo of his words still ringing in his ears. "Did it go out all right?" he asks. "Perfectly, Mr. President," one of the technicians replies. Clear as a bell. Clear as a bell. He hopes so. He hopes that clarity is something he can offer in the years ahead, because he knows the choices waiting for him will not be simple. Somewhere in New Mexico, men in goggles are preparing to test a weapon that may change the nature of war itself. Somewhere in Europe, generals are planning the last blows against a collapsing Reich. Somewhere in the Pacific, the question of Japan's surrender sits like a stone at the bottom of every conference table. He steps out into the hallway. The night in the White House feels different from the one before. Yesterday, every room was filled with fresh grief. Tonight, the grief has settled into corners and crevices, making room for the slow, grinding work of government. In the Oval Office, a few advisors wait with folders under their arms. He could go back in, take another briefing, stay at his desk for hours. He will do that soon enough. But for a moment, he turns instead toward a window that looks out over the south lawn. The grass is a shadowed expanse, the trees inked against the faint glow of the city. Beyond the wrought iron fence, lights of Washington twinkle. Each window out there holds someone whose life his decisions may touch. He thinks of them, not as numbers on charts or votes in columns, but as people who get tired and frightened and hopeful just like he does. Eleanor's voice returns to him as clearly as if she were standing beside him again. "Is there anything we can do for you? You're the one in trouble now." At the time, the words struck him like a bucket of cold water. A sudden, stark reminder that he had been thrust into the highest office at one of the worst times in history. Now, as he stands in the quiet of the window, they feel different. Not like a warning, but like a kind of benediction, an acknowledgement that trouble is the natural state of the presidency, and that the man who occupies it must be ready to live with that trouble every waking hour. He squares his shoulders. Trouble or not, this is his duty. Behind him, the door to the Oval Office stands open. Papers wait. Phones sit black and patient. Maps are pinned on the walls, their lines and pins unchanged by the broadcast he has just made. The war does not move any faster or slower because of a few minutes of radio, but somewhere, a factory worker may have gone back to her machine with a little less fear of chaos. Somewhere, a farmer may sleep knowing that someone sits in the big house at the end of Pennsylvania Avenue with his hand on the tiller. Somewhere, a soldier may close his eyes in a foxhole with the belief that the people back home are still united behind him. Those things matter. Harry Truman turns away from the window and walks back into the Oval Office. He picks up a pen and the first of many folders. The headlines will say that he became president yesterday. At the moment, Eleanor Roosevelt told him the news and he took the oath in the cabinet room. In truth, he will become president little by little, in moments like this. Choosing, signing, deciding, bearing. He sits down. The chair creaks softly. "All right," he says to the waiting men, to the invisible demands pressing in from every side, to the long, hard road between here and peace. "Let us get on with it." Outside, the Capitol settles into night. Inside, under the soft lamp in the Oval Office, the new President of the United States bends over his work, the memory of a simple exchange in a quiet room still echoing in his mind, shaping the way he understands the office he never expected to inherit.